information given by the principal of Wingate. Okay. And what you learn is this. Wingate's been around since 1960, so we have a 40-year track record. We have 400 employees working for us up in our building up in New York. 400. We are the largest, one of the largest money market makers on Wall Street. We trade $1 trillion a year in stocks for ourselves and others. We are basically a clearinghouse for some of the large firms like Vanguard and Fidelity and Janus and American Fox. Okay, we worked on software back in the early 1960s, and this software eventually led to the creation of the NASDAQ. It was my firm, it was us, our principals, that developed the software that allowed the NASDAQ to compete with the New York Stock Exchange. And that's an important criteria because that software led to our proprietary trading system that we are going to use for you to ensure that you have safety, that you have diversification, that you have protection from downside risk. We have a statistical analysis that indicates the strategy would limit your downside, your upside gains, but also your downside risk. So what our software does, you're never going to have a year when you get a 30% return, like some of the mutual funds reported back in the early 1990s, or late 1990s and early 2000s. And you're never going to have a big downside loss, because what we do is we hedge our investment by protecting you within a range. So you're going to get somewhere about an 8 to 12% return a year. You're not going to have 20 or 30, but you're not going to have big losses either because of this proprietary trading system that was used to create the NASDAQ. We trade only Fortune 500 companies. We don't trade penny stocks. We don't trade any of the pink sheet stocks that carry with them enormous risk and the potential for fraud. Only Fortune 500s. Many of the rich and famous are our clients. We have Senator Lautenberg as one of our clients. We have a number of people out in Wall Street, including Zsa Zsa Gabor and Kevin Bacon, that have been our clients for decades. We have the owner of the Mets, who has been one of our clients for decades. I wasn't going to put that in, but it is important. Okay, the owner of the company, me. I'm very well known. I'm very well respected on Wall Street. I have been a two-time chairman of the board of directors of NASDAQ. Two-time chairman. I'm currently on the board of directors of NASD, the National Association of Security Dealers. I'm on the board of directors of the Security Industry Association, and I've been a very frequent consultant to the SEC. Okay. We're a member of CIVIC. Your account is insured up to $500,000, and by the way, we've gone to Lloyd's of London, and we have bought additional insurance to protect each account up to $10 million. Okay. We are authorized by the IRS to handle IRA and pension accounts. So we've been investigated by them, and by the way, like every investment firm that has an investment advisory portion to it, we are investigated by the SEC every few years. I believe it's true, they do investigate them every few years. And we successfully passed 6 SEC investigations. So far so good, huh? So you're consulted, you decide to invest in them. Okay, the qualifications of Wingate has caused you to put money in, and you deposit $100,000 into your account in the year 1990. And now it's 2000. We're 11 years later. Wingate has produced confirmation statements and monthly statements showing you buys and sells within your account. You receive an 8 to 12% annual return, and it averages about 10% for the first decade you're with the company. Exactly what I told you would get. No big gains, no big losses. You do have some variation. If you check your statements, you would see that your return is averaging about 0.3 to about 1% a month. Not too bad. Your original investment has grown over the 11 years, and your account is now worth $250,000. You paid, now you've got a gain here, $150,000. And you paid state and federal income taxes on this $150,000 worth of gains. So, you've gotten 1099s for years. And you've paid these taxes, about $50,000 in the feds and $5,000 or so in the states. And now you decide to retire. And you call Wingate. And Wingate's actuary tells you you can retire and you can take out $40,000 a year. And your account would last more than 10 years at that rate because you're still gaining a return on what's left. So you smile. Everybody smile? You start collecting your checks. So, blissful retirement. You buy a house in Florida, you become a snowbirder, your golf handicap goes down. And from the year 2000 on, your account starts at $250. You have a 10% gain of $25,000, and you take $40,000 out. Now you've got $235,000. Your 10% gain is $23,500. And your withdrawal is $40,000. So over the course of this time, your account has degraded in value $107,000. You have an additional gain of $148,000, and you've made withdrawals of $320,000. So, you paid taxes on $148,000. You paid another $44,000 to the feds and another $4,500 to the state. And by 2008, your account is still worth $107,000, and you've withdrawn $320,000. And it's now January 1st, 2009, and you're sitting there waiting for that $40,000 check to arrive. And you find out, you get a phone call and a news flash, and it says, Wingett's owner has been arrested for running a decades-long Ponzi scheme. Oh my gosh. Now, you know you've been receiving your trade confirmations. You know you've been receiving your brokerage statements. You know that some of these people are involved in mutual funds and not a direct brokerage account. So you believe that your stocks are safe because you've got your confirmation statements, and that is what the SEC told you you should rely on in order to value your account for SIPC insurance. Okay. You know you're not going to get that $40,000 check, so you cancel your golf membership first. But all is not lost because you know you have SIPC insurance. And you know that that last statement says your account is worth $107,692 on 12/31/2008. And you know that Wingett was SIPC insured because to be a broker-dealer you have to have SIPC insurance. And it was printed on the top of every single sheet of paper you ever got from Wingett. And you feel relieved. You know that within a few days you'll be getting your check for $107,000. Just like having FDIC insurance with that. But not so fast. Not so fast, folks. Because SIPC's interpretation of insurance when a Ponzi scheme is involved is not exactly what you think it is. Because what SIPC's going to do is a little different. You discover the trustee has determined that you are a net winner. You have taken out more money than you put in. Remember, you put in $100,000 of your money in 1990, and you took out $320,000. So you're a net winner. So, SIPC has determined that because you're a net winner, you're going to get nothing on your SIPC insurance. So your $107,000 just went winging away. Okay. SIPC refuses to honor the last brokerage statement you received, and the $107,000 you get a denial letter that you're not being covered for any SIPC insurance. Zero. The money in your account's gone. No $40,000, no $107,000. You say, oh my gosh, how bad could it get? No, it gets worse. Because now you're being sued. Okay? Since you're a net winner, even though you thought you were only taking out your own money because you had all these brokerage statements, the trustee of SIPC files a lawsuit against you for all of the money you took out over the last 6 years. Because under the statute of limitations, if you're a net winner, they can recover every dime you took out over the last 6 years, over and above your original investment. So you're being sued for $220,000. $100,000 initial investment and a $320,000 withdrawal means you're a $220,000 net winner. So you've lost your $40,000, you're not getting SIPC coverage, and you have a lawsuit against you for $220,000, and you're selling your house in Florida and moving back to the cold states because you can't keep your golf membership or keep the house in Florida. Not only that, you can't get a refund on your taxes. Who's the big winner here? The government. You paid $100,000 in taxes on these family gains. So the state and federal governments, the Department of Revenues, have gained tremendously from this. As a matter of fact, in Madoff's case, the original investment was about $20 billion. The reported value on 11/30 for 11/30/2008 was $65 billion. $45 billion in 1099s issued. About $15 billion in taxes paid to the federal government alone. No one else has gotten $15 billion, and the IRS isn't being sued for recovery. The state governments and IRS want to keep the money. We'll come into a little bit. We've gotten some of that back. You've just experienced the Bernard Madoff Ponzi scheme. This is what happened. In a nutshell, everything I just went through with you is exactly what happened with Bernard Madoff. Everything I told you about Wing It is Bernard Madoff Investment Securities. Everything I told you about being the two-time chairman of the NASDAQ and developing the software to create the NASDAQ and being a consultant for the SEC and being a member of all these security boards and being investigated by the SEC 6 times and being investigated by the IRS once, all of that is true. That is exactly what happened. And if you replace the name Wing It with Bernard Madoff Investment Securities, you'll learn what this course is all about. True or false? Confirmation statements from your broker are evidence of what you bought and sold. False. According to the SEC, SIPC, and the Madoff Bankruptcy Trustee, your confirmation slips do not mean a thing, and you're not honoring any of them. Your monthly brokerage statements is proof of the contents and the value of your account. False. According to the SEC, SIPC, and the Madoff Trustee, your monthly brokerage statements don't mean a thing, and you're not honoring any of them. Your brokerage statement is protected from fraud because the SEC investigates all brokerage statements, all brokerages and investment advisors. False. Just because the SEC did the investigation does not mean the fraud did not occur. And it doesn't mean they have much liability for failure to do a competent investigation. Your brokerage account is safe and insured by the federal government. Well, that's false. Okay, SIPC is not run by the government. SIPC is run and funded by the brokerage industry, not a government entity. And the brokerage industry pays the money into SIPC that's being used to distribute to people. What do you think their objective is? To limit those payments as much as they can. And that's exactly what they're doing. Your bank statement is proof of the value of your checking or savings account. True. According to FDIC regulations, savers can rely on their bank statement to corroborate the value of their account. You can't rely on your brokerage statement. Your bank account is safe and insured by government insurance. That's true. The FDIC is funded and run by a federal agency, and if you had a bank failure, you would receive a check through FDIC, they say within 72 hours. For SIPC insurance, under the Madoff fraud, because your brokerage statements don't mean anything, because your confirmation statements don't mean anything, the trustee is using a process called net equity. He's looking at every deposit you ever made, in our case, over 20 years, every withdrawal you ever took out, taking the difference, and that is what your SIPC coverage is, net equity. Now the problem is, if you can't use your brokerage statement, and you can't use your confirmation statements, what the trustee is doing is going through the bank statements for Bernard Madoff Investment Securities for 20 years. And he is starting at people who invested early, who invested late, and he's working backwards, because Madoff had all the records computerized from about 2004 on. Prior to that, they're in boxes of microfiche in a warehouse. SIPC insurance, to this day, we're a 1990s investor. We won't be getting the SIPC check until probably around 2015. That's how long it's taking them to go through this. The average Madoff investor is about 67 years old. The real early investors who are older will likely die before SIPC insurance kicks in. FDIC insurance does not equal SIPC insurance. You may think your only risk in the brokerage industry is to the volatility of the markets going up and down, and that is very wrong. Okay, who am I? Well, as I said, I'm one of the investors in Madoff. We were invested in 1990. I'll go through that in a bit more detail later. When I heard about this on December 11th, I kind of thought that we were covered because we were something called a direct investor, as opposed to an indirect through a mutual fund. I'll talk about the differences later. And I really thought that brokerage statement meant something. And I thought those things existed. I thought the confirmation statements represent real trading. None of that was true. Like hundreds of others in our group, and I'm a group of about 450 people right now, of all the investors, we've been working with our government to try to understand what happened and to seek recovery of some of these funds. And like very few others in our group, I've been willing to go out there and talk to the press. Every time they're willing to talk to us, I've given a 90-minute lecture about a half a dozen times now, the short version of what you're going to see. And I put this together in the hope that I can educate you about what really happened. And as I said, I'd love it if this were done to a group of